Angie Arrigo of Empire Magazine called this movie a sparkling little gem that takes the family road movie to unhoped-for heights of hilarity and humanity. Time magazine critic Richard Schickel said that it comes closer to the truth about the way people really live, on the edge of fantasy-driven desperation, than our sanctimonies permit us to think. And Letterboxd user Kayla says everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but if you don't like this movie, you're absolutely wrong. On this episode of Ruined Childhoods, we decide the fate of Little Miss Sunshine.
Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be? It's the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Greetings, Starfighters! It's Ruined Childhoods time. I'm Dan. That's Jon. How are you, Jon?
I'm doing well. Dan, that's quite the intro. I don't know if you've been watching some, 80s variety shows. Sounds like very like The Muppet Show.
And welcome to the show. Yeah, we've got a great show planned for you today. We've got a lot of great acts coming up. And here's John Denver.
And we're going to talk about the aughts classic Little Miss Sunshine.
Yes. And it's Little Miss Sunshine, everybody. Whoa. Yeah, that's not even, I don't know why I'm half-assing a Kermit impression. Like, I can usually do Kermit pretty well.
Little Miss Sunshine.
Oh, hi-ho there, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about a charming indie film.
Greg Kinnear. I don't know. Do you think that Kermit's ever met? Do you think that Kermit has ever met Toni Collette?
I thought he must have. I mean, how has he not worked with Toni Collette? Like, Toni Collette is just one of the most amazing actors working in the last
Dan, have I ever
years?
told you about my... I wouldn't call it a beef with Toni Collette because I really do like Toni Collette. I think she's fantastic. But have I ever told you? She has not wronged me, but there's one issue that I have with, I guess, like her performances in most of her movies. Have I not told you about this?
No.
Okay. I don't know why exactly I feel this way, but for some reason, it's really distracting to me when Toni Collette is playing anything other than an Australian, because I feel like Toni Collette is the most Australian-looking woman I've ever seen.
So what, outside of Muriel's wedding? I'm like, when else has she played
think so. And I
Muriel's wedding is awesome, by the way.
I specify woman because Hugo Weaving is the male counterpart.
Oh.
And it is, and I don't know if it's like this like high cheekbone look that I just associate with the continent of Australia, but for me, it just really, like, it's when I hear an American accent coming out of either of those actors, it throws me because I'm like, you just look so Australian.
I don't disagree with you on that. It doesn't throw me as much.
Do you know what I mean by an Australian look? Because I know that it's kind of a funny thing.
I know what you mean, and it's not. I get the high cheekbone thing, and as I'm mentally running through my Rolodex of Australian actors, most of them have high cheekbones. Ironically, the ones I'm thinking of who maybe don't have been less successful. Paul Hogan, I don't think, has the highest cheekbones in the world, but Nicole Kidman.
I would say Nicole Kidman is the exception because I feel like she doesn't look Australian, and then it's just like, oh, right, you're Australian when she begins to speak in her native accent.
Yeah, well, because it's been such a long time since she has played an Australian. Like, I feel like Days of Thunder, it might be the last one I remember. I just remember, let me out of the car, Cole. Let me out of the car. So yeah, so Nicole, but she's got high. Does Russell Crowe relatively high cheekbones?
I don't consider him very Australian looking. I mean, like,
What about Hugh
I
Jackman?
feel like if he's a 1 and Hugo Weaving is a 10, that's kind of like where the scale is.
Right. Yes. Well, yeah. Hugo Weaving is, I would say, definitely the 10 on the Australian scale for men, I guess.
For men. The
Yeah.
Australian scale for men.
Yeah. Aye.
But hey, Dan, I just want to say something to any of our listeners who have never listened to the show before. This is Ruined Childhoods, where we don't necessarily just talk about Australian actors looking Australian. This is a
We've
podcast
never
where
talked about it before.
We've literally never talked about it before, but if this is your first time listening, it's all we've talked about. So I want to just make sure to mention that this is a podcast where we talk about cult and classic movies, as well as movies that we just really like, and, you know, kind of just shoot the breeze about them a little bit, talk about the things that we like about them, talk about the things that bug us, talk about Australian looking actors. And we also then talk about how we think these movies could be brought back as a prequel, a sequel, reboot, remake, a board game, ice cream flavor, doo-wop band. I don't know, whatever it could be.
Just revived in a rock opera. A doo-wop band that sings only songs about said whether it's Little Miss Sunshine or another movie. But it could be that. It could be just however we see this like property taking on another life, being revived, because that's what happens. Which, by the way, John, speaking of like that's what happens, did you even know that they were doing another Father of the Bride remake?
I want to say it came up in one of our news bits a while ago, and that Andy Garcia would be involved, but I don't remember much else about it.
Okay, yeah, so it premieres in June on HBO Max. It's Andy Garcia and Gloria Estefan, who are the...
See, the Gloria Estefan thing is more surprising to me than the fact that it exists in the first place, because when's the last time we've heard from Gloria Estefan?
I mean, you know, aside from like, well, she had her musical a few years ago. Like,
did she?
Yeah, there was a whole musical. I think it was called like Conga or something like that.
Well, I mean, if you're going to do a musical based on anything Gloria Estefan, it's probably going to be Conga.
I mean, you get the whole audience. Oh, no, it was about her life, and I think like the bus accident and her marriage. I think her marriage to Renee Estevez.
I don't know. I guess I'll have to find a way to see it.
But Gloria Estefan, the few times she has acted, I thought she was very good. Actually, I think of Wes Craven's Music of the Heart from 1997, like the one non-horror movie.
Interesting.
Wes Craven directed like basically like a teacher movie, and like it's Meryl Streep and playing. It was based on a true story about like someone who wanted to start an orchestra program, and Gloria Estefan like it co-stars in it. It was a good movie. But yeah, so anyway, so that's the Father of the Bride remake. I do have one more things.
I'm gonna just get in there first with I had an almost one more thing.
Oh, okay, all right.
So I'll share my almost one more thing. I was thinking about the character of Helen, played by Diane Wiest,
in Parenthood, by the way, which was the movie we covered.
Right, our last episode was the 1989 dramedy classic Parenthood, and so we're talking a lot about how the character of Helen, played by Diane Wiest, is raising her kids, one of which is played by Martha Plimpton, and it was about to be a one more thing, because I was like, wait a second, wasn't Martha Plimpton in a television series, a sitcom called Raising Helen? And then I was like, no, that's Raising Hope. Raising Helen was the Kate Hudson movie. So I was like, if only it was so close that it could have been a one more thing. So this is my not really, but almost a one more thing.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. No, I mean, it's still interesting. And I remember I watched a few episodes of that show. Very good. Cloris Leachman
Cloris Leachman
was also on it.
Pour One Out.
Pour One Out.
Yeah, Kate McCucci was on it. It seemed like a fun show.
It was a fun show.
Yeah,
it's a fun show. So my one more thing kind of comes around one of the conversations that we didn't have. And for those who haven't listened to the Parenthood episode, Parenthood is a favorite movie of mine and John's.
Sure.
And it is one that we could go on and on about. And
we did.
We did go on. And well, no, we didn't, because there were definitely some things that, you know, we couldn't talk about every scene, and we couldn't talk about.
No.
But I don't know that, I think we touched upon it, but didn't really talk about like how, what in the movie, like really, like what has happened in our lives. And I was thinking about it because I had an experience recently that made me say like, oh my God, this is almost exactly the scene out of Parenthood.
Okay.
So I wanted to, I was interested, I put the question out on our Instagram at Ruined Childhoods Pod, and so I figured I would share my story briefly, and then if you have like anything, what has happened in your life where you have said, oh, that's like, because I feel like Parenthood is full of just those relatable moments and people.
Yeah.
Mine. Oh,
go ahead.
I was going to stall for you a moment because you've heard this story before. So my daughter, who's 8 years old, on her birthday, we got a Ben and Jerry's ice cream cake, and it had all these like, you know, weird psychedelic trippy colors on it, and she of course ate too much of it, and then overnight, like I go, she was up, she couldn't get to sleep, and she was like sitting on her bed, and I go in to, like, oh, what's the matter? And she's like, oh, my tummy hurts. And she had also been sick, like on and off. So there's just a lot. This was also right before we were having a baby. So who knows what was going on, but her tummy hurt. And she, and I said, I was like, do you think you're going to throw up? She goes, no. And then proceeds to vomit the most artificially colored vomit I have ever seen. Not that I am an aficionado of the vomit color palette, but this was like, it was so like the color of the food coloring in this cake, and it was so like this unnatural blue. And I just thought to myself, I'm like, oh, wow. So just like in Parenthood, after they get back from the baseball game, and Taylor, played by Allison Porter, has had too many hot dogs, and her tummy hurts, and Steve Martin comes in and says, you think you want to throw up? Now, in her case, she just says, okay, and projectile vomits all over him. So, but I found, to me, that was one of those moments that was so close. It was like, oh man, yeah, I guess that's what happens. Right. Yeah. I want to say that being a parent, and I have an almost 5-year-old, and being a parent, I feel like your every day is loaded with these moments where you think like this could be part of the movie Parenthood, or the show Parenthood for that matter. Right. And I don't want to get into a like kids say the darndest thing type of thing, but it's a lot of those, we're always having those debates with these children who don't understand logic and don't know how everything works. And not to say that we as adults do, but we've been around a little bit longer. And, there was a situation tonight where, my kid wanted to have a kiwi. And I said to her, you can have it after you finish your dinner, after you've eaten enough of your dinner to my satisfaction. And so she proceeds to, basically have like one spaghetti strand and say like, is that enough? Is that enough? And I'm just like, you need to eat a little bit more. And she has like one more half of a strand of spaghetti. And then I'm just like, I need you to eat some more of your dinner. And she goes, but I can't eat any more. I'm so full. And I was like, well, then you don't have any room for any kiwi. And she's like,
well, I have room for it's like that kind of a conversation.
No,
so
don't you know kids have a separate stomach for desserts?
Absolutely. And it's not like she's asking me for, some sort of like a cupcake or something. It's fruit, it's like a totally reasonable thing to give her, but I just want her to eat some other things that, have some protein in it or some other vitamins and so on and so forth. So
right.
Anyway, it's just those little moments that come up. I can't say that I've had any Buckman-esque experiences. I'm sure that if I really thought about it, I could come up with something, but I think that that's what makes Parenthood such a special movie, is that it condenses all of these major life moments of being a child and being a parent into this like 2-hour movie where it's like, you're not going to have the kid throwing up, losing the one kid's retainer, having to throw a birthday party, like all those things all like within a week. It's right. It doesn't say how much time span this movie is, but there's an understanding that time has passed.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, they do. It's over the course of, it goes from, I want to say, like a mid to late spring to late summer. Because they talk about...
Okay.
Yeah. There's a few months.
Okay, you're a Ron Howard film detective.
Well, no, I'm just saying because when they have the meeting with Kevin, they're still like, well, the next school year is X amount of months off. I mean...
Oh my God. Fair enough. But did you have one more things, or should we move on to our movie of the week?
I think it's time to move on to our movie of the week.
Yeah, well, as this is the month of May and we have the month of June coming up right on its heels, we wanted to just talk about family movies for a couple of months, and of course, most movies could be considered family movies. I mean, the Fast and the Furious franchise, could be considered more of one than even Little Miss Sunshine. But, we have Parenthood, where we do have this like multi-generational splitting off into the different, segments of the family. And then, we do have a smaller family unit, still intergenerational, but more mixed with Little Miss Sunshine. Dan, should I go ahead and just give a synopsis real quick?
Go for it.
A complicated family filled with eccentrics sets off on a road trip from New Mexico to California so that Olive, the youngest child, can perform in the Little Miss Sunshine pageant. Also in the family is Olive's depressed and determined half-brother, Dwayne, who is 9 months into a vow of silence until he gets into the Air Force Academy so he can become a pilot. They also live with their grandfather, a horny heroin addict who has been kicked out of his retirement community. He has a particular interest in Olive's pageant dreams. His son, Richard, is on the brink of getting a book deal for his 9-step plan for success. And Richard is married to Cheryl, the breadwinner of the family, who just wants to keep everyone together. She also just brought in her brother Frank, who is fresh off a suicide attempt after losing his job for being in a relationship with a student. On their journey, they deal with failure left and right, but are determined to make it to California so Olive can compete and thrive at the Little Miss Sunshine pageant. So as Richard, we have Greg Kinnear. As Cheryl, we have the aforementioned Toni Collette. As Richard's father, whose name I'm blanking on, we have Alan Arkin. I'm looking at it right now. Edwin. Okay, I don't know if we really even knew that.
I don't know that they might mention it once.
Fair enough. As Dwayne, we have Paul Dano, who's really been, hitting the success train hard with the latest Batman movie. We have Abigail Breslin as Olive, and we have a very early in his career Steve Carell playing Frank. And wow, what a cast! Wow.
An impressive cast, and we should also mention the writing directing team behind it, and I'm about to botch their names because of course I don't have my information.
So it's John. So it wasn't, they didn't write this, but it was directed by Jonathan Dayton and Valerie Faris, and it was written by Michael Arndt.
Okay, I was totally gonna get their names right, but I thought because Jonathan Dayton is also a regional high school in New Jersey, I was like, no, it must be something. I know, I was like, I remember Dayton and Ferris, but I couldn't remember there. So they directed it, and Michael Arndt wrote it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this was his first screenplay, and actually won the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay, which is amazing. This is his first screenplay, and he also got involved with a lot of Pixar films. Was worked on WALL-E and Up, and then was a writer for Toy Story 3. Was part of Cars 2. Wrote a little bit of Brave.
Wrote Star Wars: The Force Awakens. It was writer
on the Star Wars: The Force Awakens,
Hunger Games.
Yeah, so definitely went from indie gem to big movie juggernaut fast. And that's pretty cool. Good for him. Definitely well deserved, because the script for this film is really something special, and it deals with a lot of really heavy topics that I think are, at least from the way I saw it, dealt with in a very smart way. And I really appreciated the way that they handled Frank's sexual orientation. He is a gay man, but it is never played for comedy, with the exception of the porno magazine that is, it's not drawing attention to his homosexuality as a jab, but it's part of a lighthearted scene where it's he would be doing something fun and goofy
right,
up until the moment where it stops being that way. But
it's not at all. Yeah, it's not at all played that way, and it's one of those moments where you're just like, okay, wow, awesome. That's awesome how they set that up.
Yeah, and I think that what's also pretty cool about his character is it is understood and discussed that he has attempted to commit suicide. We never see the attempt. We only see that he has bandages on his wrists, and Olive is the one who asks him about it, and the family is honest with her about the whole situation. And I thought that was pretty cool. And even when Olive learns that her uncle is gay, it's not talked about in a way it's a very 9-year-old or whatever, however old she is, I think way of processing this information that she's never heard about before.
Well, right. You fell in love with a boy.
She's that's silly.
Yeah. Something basically that's silly. And yeah. And the way that Steve Carell plays it.
Yeah.
As Frank is funny, because it's, you could tell that when he agrees that he's yeah, it is silly. And he thinks about
pretty silly.
Yeah, it was pretty silly,
yeah.
Right? His affair with this student who we end up meeting.
Yeah, that popped collared, sprightly young chap.
Yeah, seriously. Oh man, the Proust scholars. I wonder if I would enjoy the movie. I enjoy the movie. I love this is a great movie. I really enjoyed watching it again. But I wonder if there's more of it that you get if you're familiar with the writings of Marcel Proust. Are you familiar?
I am not.
You are not the leading Proust scholar, the preeminent.
No. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to cram in my Proust, but I'm trying to think of the name of the other
Sugarman. Was it Larry Sugarman?
Larry Sugarman. I was if only I had read Larry Sugarman's book. The foremost Proust
understanding Proust. That's another great thing about this movie is it tackles a lot of serious topics and things that I think that come up in families and that are part of family dynamics. Everything from the retired older generation because he's out of his retirement home, he's living with them, and he has he definitely has his own outlook on life, that he's old, he's made it this long. Why shouldn't he just do
whatever he wants
whatever
to
he
do.
wants and say whatever he wants? And
totally. And
Alan Arkin won an Academy Award, by the way, for the performance.
Yeah, and he's fantastic. I always love seeing Alan Arkin. Always good.
Well,
always
I think this movie kind of started the little like Alan Arkin, like when he's in Argo. I feel like his character in Argo, fuck yourself. That character, like it stems from this.
Well, I mean, but I feel like also in like Edward Scissorhands, his hey, speaking of another Diane Wiest classic.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
Yeah, but in Edward Scissorhands, the way he plays that character is not just like, oh, he's the dad or whatever. Like, he puts his own like thing into it, even though it's not like a huge character. Like, you appreciate the way that he plays it. And if not played right, a character like that in Edward Scissorhands could not make the movie very good. And he really got it. He really added to it. So yeah, I always appreciate seeing Alan Arkin. I think he's fantastic.
Yeah, he absolutely is.
So something that I wanted to mention that, when I was watching this the other day, something that really stood out to me about this movie is that, like, one of those first scenes where Cheryl gets home with Frank and she's, gathering the family to eat dinner together. She brings home a bucket of chicken, and there was something that felt just like very real. It's a class. It's like, I guess like lower middle class, it's like they aren't financially comfortable, but they still have, the house and are able to, get a bucket of chicken and feed the family and everything. And the way that Cheryl gathers everyone together, she's just like, you know what, we'll just do paper plates tonight. Who cares? Like those little details I think are really brilliant. I don't know how much of this was in the script originally. And also how she like gets out a bottle of Sprite and she is asking who wants Sprite. And I feel like the choice to make it Sprite is really interesting. And it's like very much of like a mom move, it's like there's no caffeine in it, so it's like at dinner time you're not giving the kids caffeine. Like there's something
clear,
about it.
So it's a step closer to water than Coca-Cola.
And it's just like a given that they're gonna have the soda for dinner, and I don't know. There's just something about the Sprite of it that I feel makes it feel so much more authentic than if it were Coke.
It makes me feel so. And when there's a specific brand, and when you're talking about families that really are have to live by a strict budget. I mean, most families need to live by a budget. But like when you're struggling to make ends meet, and you've got a lot of dependents because no one else in that household is earning money. Like Olive is the next like contender.
Right.
So it makes me think that, okay, Sprite is like, okay, they got the coupon for Sprite. Like it's got to be brand specific. It's not just like, oh, whatever soda we have.
And that's the thing is like, there's never any discussion about it. It's just there. But because she calls it out by name, the audience associates things with it at that time. And what it made me think of, and I don't know if I've talked about this on this podcast before, but it's an aspect of the movie Knives Out that I really love. Which I think that you and I have talked a lot about the movie Knives Out, just in general. It's so wonderful.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the name of her character, but Ana de Armas's character, she has this condition where if she lies, she vomits, and she towards the beginning tells a lie and vomits, and it's kind of just like, the detectives are just like, huh, wow, that's true. That's so strange. And then she says she's kind of finding an excuse to go inside of the house, and she says that she's just going to go get some scope. She specifies that she's using a very specific brand of mouthwash, Scope, which is I think it's like just a funnier one to mention than like Listerine. There's just something about the word scope and specifying name brand. And I don't know, I don't think it's the same that as something like, the Sprite in Little Miss Sunshine, but it always sticks out to me when there's such specificity and it's not the first thing that you would think of.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But yet it's like the standard because look, Scope has been around for as long as I can remember as kind of like as the, I know there's lots of brands of mouthwash, but it's really look, there's lots of fast food, but it's a McDonald's and Burger King world. And there's lots of types of mouthwash, but like it's a Listerine and Scope world.
Yeah, and but it's almost like somebody saying like, "Oh, can you hand me a Puffs Plus?"
Right. Well, yeah, right. Well, no, and it's interesting. Yeah, you brought that up because I was thinking about like there are some of those things that are like regionalisms where you would say in some parts of the country, if you want a tissue, you'd ask for a Kleenex, even if the box is Puffs Plus. You'd still, if Kleenex is synonymous just for tissue.
Absolutely, and I know that in some parts of the country, people call all types of soda Coke.
Yeah.
And and so it's interesting to me that this, I just loved the Sprite thing. I thought that was such a really interesting touch. I appreciated that a lot. And I don't know. And I also realized like this came out in 2006, I believe.
Yep.
And this was right at that time where, and I don't know if this was one that really kicked it off, but it was like the era of like the quirky comedy. And so
it is the Fox Searchlight mid 2000s boom. And
yeah,
it is. So, I mean, and I have a list, and actually I don't know if the last one on my list was actually a Fox Searchlight movie, but, The Good Girl, Juno, Garden State, Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the first
I know
ones.
that Napoleon Dynamite came out in 2004. Garden State was also 2004. Juno was 2007. Yeah,
2007. And the Good Girl, I think, was 2002. That was with Jennifer Aniston, John C. Reilly.
Oh,
that was good.
Okay. See, but the thing about this one clearly you have the yellow VW bus. You have Abigail Breslin wearing this workout sweatband. Like her outfits are very reminiscent of something in Juno or Napoleon Dynamite.
Quirky. I'm pretty sure Polyphonic Spree is on the soundtrack.
Oh, Little Miss Sunshine, you have Sufjan Stevens, and then I think Devotchka is the one who did the rest of the music for it. But it's like the plucky do 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 do. Yeah, and it's a wonderful score, and I know that it's been used for other things after this too. But it's pretty cool, yeah. So I don't know. This movie has a lot of those elements, like this whole thing where they, after the grandfather passes away, spoiler, sorry, they do this thing where they steal his body because they don't want to waste the time or spend the time filling out paperwork when they got to get to California and do all this stuff. So it's pretty wild. Oh, let me tell you about one other moment that I loved. This is in that same scene where Alan Arkin's character has passed away, and you have the doctor coming out to tell the family that they'd done everything they could do, and he's like, "I'm so sorry," and he's just like, "I'm gonna get the grief counselor to walk you through the next steps," and he just goes, Linda. He
Yeah.
just like shouts the name Linda, which is such a funny name to shout, first of all. But and then Linda, I mean, that character was irritating. I mean, I totally understand her, but I feel like for somebody who deals with grief, very bad demeanor.
Yeah, it really felt like, again, this family is not like, they're not even going to the top shelf, clinics. And
Right.
it felt very much just like this grief counselor deals with this stuff so much that she's like, okay, you could do this, you have this option, these meetings happen here, this happens when, this is when you can do. And they're probably not the preeminent the foremost grief counselor in the country.
No, Linda's your last resort.
Yeah, no, yeah. Linda does what she needs to do to keep her job, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and Linda, played by Paula Newsome.
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
So
Just
there were
thought I'd
some
shout
other
her
things.
out.
Oh, so actually, speaking of some like casting, one thing that I thought was interesting. So first of all, so we've got a couple of, I feel like, references in this movie to other movies. The character of Stan Grossman,
Right.
who's going to who's going to get Richard, who's trying to get Richard his book deal, or is trying to sell this 9 Steps. And
Sure.
Stan Grossman was a character in Fargo who was kind of had a similar vibe, where he was like, the financial advisor for William H. Macy's father-in-law in that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's like kind of advising them on deals, and it was I didn't think it was like supposed to be the same character.
No, it's played by Bryan Cranston.
Yeah,
in this
yeah.
movie. Yeah.
And I also thought it was interesting that when you get to the pageant, the very uptight, very much like by the book, by the rules pageant master is played by Beth Grant, who fans of Donnie Darko would remember.
Sure, played a very similar character back in 2001, 2002.
I'm starting to question your commitment to Sparkle Motion.
Exactly. And also, we've talked about Beth Grant a lot because she's one of the Joel Schumacher players.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Love to see Beth Grant. And, while we're talking about casting, and at the time that this movie came out, I mean, people wouldn't have known that he was going to be as big as he became in Breaking Bad. Alongside Stan Grossman himself, Bryan Cranston, but Dean Norris plays the like motorcycle cop who pulls them over when their horn starts to go on the fritz and everything. And so, what's funny to me about Dean Norris playing this cop, which this scene is a little bizarre. There's a corpse covered in just like a very thin sheet in the trunk. And Greg Kinnear's character raises some suspicion that there's something that shouldn't be seen in the trunk. And it turns out that Dean Norris's character thinks that he's referring to the stack of porn that the grandfather had asked Uncle Frank to go purchase at the gas station, which is when we have Uncle Frank also buying a Buns and Ammo male magazine. And so then we just see this like horny cop like smiling and chuckling at these magazines, and it made me think of I don't want to sound like I'm not like a sex positive person here, but Dean Norris, I think, mistook Twitter for Google one time and tweeted 2 words that will forever change the way I think about Dean Norris: sex gifs. And so Dean Norris to me will always and forever be the sex gifs guy. And it really tracks with his character in Little Miss Sunshine.
Sure does.
The horny cop. But hey, Dean Norris always playing a good cop.
Yeah.
Not like good cop, but like he's good at playing a cop.
He's good at playing. Yeah, no,
an authority figure,
Yeah.
A law enforcement agent.
Absolutely. Yeah. No doubt about it. Would happily cast Dean Norris as any law enforcement officer, not just police.
No,
FBI.
hey, if I was casting people and things, Dean Norris wouldn't be at the bottom of my list.
ATF, totally. DEA, add an N, Dean
Norris.
There you go.
So, well, DEA is his job in Breaking Bad.
Yeah, there we go. We brought it back around. So yes, so Beth Grant is in there.
Should we make t-shirts that have the DEA emblem and then it says like DEA and then below it says N Norris?
Yeah, or like the big DEA and just a little like handwritten N, and then Norris. It wouldn't have his face. That's all it would just.
No. Just the little emblem. It just says Dean Norris.
DEA Norris.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really fun movie, and really well written script. It sets up, like I was saying before, with this scene with the porn, the script does a really nice job of setting things up in a way that's not too obvious. It's not like when he brings out the porn mags, you're thinking like, oh, that something's gonna happen with that.
Well,
or maybe you are. I don't know. I wasn't.
Well, also when they're in the hospital waiting to find out about the grandfather, there's like what seems just like a whatever throwaway line where Olive grabs some like pamphlets and she's just like, anyone want to do a colorblind test? And then when they're in the bus together and they bust it out and they discover that Dwayne is colorblind and Frank tells him that if he's colorblind, he can't be in the Air Force. Oh, that is an intense scene. That is so heartbreaking. And Paul Dano is amazing at, showing that raw emotion and having such like a big outburst, and the way that he kind of comes back and the family just forgives him for what he's said is really amazing.
Yeah, no, he blows up. He totally, it's so understanding. You set it up so well with that commitment, that 9-month vow of silence, that when he's like, when it all comes crashing down and he's in the back of the car and he's just gonna burst. And this movie, like Parenthood, deftly blends the comedy and the drama, and that's what makes it, again, like Parenthood. It does a really great job of presenting life in the roller coaster, if you will.
Yeah. To
paraphrase Grandma Buckman, the roller coaster of, there's going to be you're going to be at each other's throats, and then 5 minutes later, you're all going to be working together again, and that's family.
Yeah, and I think that what's so cool is like Dwayne, who has gone on record saying that he hates his family, clearly cares a lot about Olive and wants to protect her from embarrassment and people being mean. Mm-hmm. And the way that he pleads to Cheryl to not send Olive out in the pageant after he and Frank see what it is actually like is, there's true love for his family in that scene. And just big credit to this movie for demonstrating that in the way that it did.
Yeah, and also I have to say something. I mean, I don't know. Maybe this is something that people notice about this movie the first time they see it. I don't think I caught it the first time I saw it, but the commentary of the whole pageant sequence where you have these kids, these children
Mm-hmm.
who all, except for Olive looks very much like you said, like an 8 or 9-year-old kid putting on her little workout outfit. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, she looks very much like a kid. She acts very much like a kid. And then you have these children who are with spray tans and makeup, and they're wearing these like a very adult look. Like, I find the whole thing about child pageants like, disturbing. And everybody is all into that. But then, I guess another spoiler alert, when Olive gets up and does her dance to Super Freak, basically a toned down like strip club routine, but she does it without any, like, it's very naive and very much just like, this is what my grandpa told me is good dancing. And how everyone is just so appalled by it. And I love how this family that's been through hell finally just comes to this moment. It's such catharsis when she's up there dancing and she's just doing her. She's not really. She's doing her thing, and people they're getting up and they're walking out. And, like Beth Grant's flipping out. And when they just start to get up and go up and dance, you feel so happy for them. You're like, yes, I'm so happy for you that you have this you need this, your family needs this.
Well, this is a movie that's about winners and losers and success and failure. And we know that, one of the very first moments of the movie is Greg Kinnear's character giving his lecture about the 9 steps to success. And he's the one that says, like, if you don't think you're going to win, don't bother doing it. Whereas, and I want to say it's the grandfather says, like, the real failure would be not trying. And the change that happens with Richard, Greg Kinnear's character, is, I mean, we see him completely lose his mind when his whole pitch for his success book fails. He completely unravels, and for him now, the only failure would be for them to not get to this pageant. And he does everything he can to not fail at that. And if that means transporting a dead body over state lines illegally and driving on the boardwalk and, doing all these things that he's not breaking all the rules in order to succeed, he's going to do it. And when he sees that his daughter is clearly not going to win this pageant, he makes this a moment, and he works to make this a moment of success for their family and bringing the family together, because they have kind of all unraveled in their own ways. Cheryl and Richard have been having their own arguments about things that make it seem like their marriage is in danger. We have Dwayne, who's completely losing it over the fact that he will not be in the Air Force. The grandpa's dead. And then we have Frank, who, started off in this bad place and, kind of got to a point where he was lifted up by the family. And then when he sees Larry Sugarman and that student, he then unravels again. And then this moment where they are coming together and everybody has kind of come together in support of Olive, except fully Richard. And then at that moment when he's supposed to go up there and take her off the stage, but instead decides to dance with her dance moves, that is the real victory of the family. And that is what gets the rest of the family doing the same thing and all together at once. And you know what? And it really would have made the grandfather proud. He would have loved it. Yeah.
And You know what's interesting? Before this is really, I think, my kind of closing thought before we move on to, what we're gonna do here. But I don't think at least I didn't consciously. I mean, it was your suggestion to cover this movie, and I don't think you intended to cover it as something connected to parenthood. I think just something that loosely thematically, but man, when you look at some of this, when you look at, like, we were talking with Parenthood about Gil, Steve Martin, his best decisions as a parent are the ones that are made in the moment.
Right. We were talking about that last time. Yeah.
Cowboy Dan will be here. Dan will be here. Richard is the same way. We're going to get Dad's, we're going to take his body out through the window. We need to go. We can't leave the body. They won't let us take the body. We need to take the body. Getting up and dancing. They're not these planned out, the 9 steps. He's spent hours planning and all that. And that hasn't worked out so well. But when he makes these decisions in the moment to give his, not just his, in the interest of his own success, but his family's success, like you're saying, he's at his best. He's happy. He's at his happiest there. And I find that, in the ending, that the beauty pageant scene reminded me so much of the play at the end of Parenthood, the Snow White play, because
that's true. I didn't
Justin goes up and he's ruining the play. And they're like,
I hadn't even thought about that.
They're laughing and they're enjoying it. And, all the kids are on stage playing with Justin, and Taylor's putting her costume on it. Yeah. And it's so similar. And I mean, I don't think I'm not like, oh, Michael Arndt clearly watched Parenthood while he was writing this. No, but it's just a great example. And it shows kind of how, it tells the story about how, it's a roller coaster, and there's going to be those dips, and then there's going to be those really exhilarating moments, and sometimes you don't know which one is coming and when.
Right. I think that another thing, you're saying that you don't think that Michael Arndt was watching Parenthood and, writing the script at the same time or anything, but Lowell Gans and Bablu Mandel, the way that they write, and a lot of the themes that come into a lot of their writing, they're some of the biggest names in comedic but with heart films of the 80s and into the 90s. And when somebody is just kind of getting their start in the early to mid aughts, those are the movies that they grew up with. Those are the things that they, came up watching, and certainly would have left an impression. And also, it's like, if you're trying to be a screenwriter, especially at that time, that writing team is one to look up to. So it wouldn't be surprising if there actually was a, some sort of influence or parallel.
I mean, that would be really interesting. I'd be interested to know more about that. It was never anything that I really thought about before. I never really made a connection between the two. I mean, even having, the Alan Arkin's character isn't really cantankerous in this, the way that Jason Robards is in Parenthood. But Richard kind of reminded me of a Nathan.
Yeah, very type A.
Yeah.
And it's just this is the plan. We are not deviating from the plan.
Right.
Kind of a person. So yeah.
So Little Miss Sunshine, great movie.
There's more that we could certainly keep talking about, but I would love to know. Well, before, Dan, I ask you, while you do this, I do want to note that there was a musical based on the film, music and lyrics by William Finn. And that was workshopped at the Sundance Institute Theater Lab at White Oak and premiered in at the La Jolla Playhouse, and this was in 2011. And I'd read a little bit more about it, what's on the Wikipedia, but it's a lot of theater names that I wouldn't know if they're important people or not. And I'm sure that they're wonderful actors. Here we go. Hunter Foster, Malcolm Getz, Georgie James. Do you know any of these people, Dan?
Oh yeah. Hunter Foster. He played Seymour in I want to say, I forget if it was the off-Broadway or the Broadway revival of Little Shop of Horrors.
Okay.
Last. And who was the second name that you said?
The second name that I said was Malcolm Getz. So Hunter Foster was also in The Producers. I'm trying to see. Okay, so you did on Broadway, Bridges of Madison County, Hand on a Hard Body, $1 Million Quartet. The Producers on Broadway was Leo Bloom, which is also interesting because Matthew Broderick had an assistant named Michael Arndt who
quit his job being Matthew Broderick's assistant to write the screenplay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Rory O'Malley, who played Frank in the off-Broadway production of it, he was in the original Broadway cast of Book of Mormon.
Okay.
Yeah. David Rash or Rash, you'd know his face. He played Grandpa in the off Broadway. Like,
gotcha.
Yeah, you would know his face if you saw it. Like, he's in a lot of things.
Cool.
So Little Miss Sunshine has been a musical.
There you go. So Dan, what would you do given the opportunity?
You know, I was thinking about this one. I was trying to think outside of the box. I appreciate, John, that you often have ideas that are out of the strictly like sequel, prequel, remake, reboot realm.
Dan, you're going to be disappointed in what I'm going to say in a few minutes.
Oh, well, I don't know. You might be disappointed in what I'm going to say in a few seconds. I got nothing. Here's what I would do. Here's what I would do with this. Now, because you know what would I say? A musical. Yeah, okay. Like, sure, whatever. We could have a prequel that has like, you know, life in the Hoover household, growing up. I don't know. You could have a sequel. You could do all that. And I'm sure it would be fine. But I feel like this movie was just like lightning in a bottle. And it was also like perfect for that moment in time. For the Fox Searchlight boom of the aughts. Mm-hmm. But I think the screenplay should be used, I think, to teach. I think there's a lot of good screenwriting. I think it provides a lot of good examples.
The Academy agrees.
Yeah, the of course. But I think like this one more so than like a Pulp Fiction, which also won Best Original Screenplay. I would say this is would be a great screenplay if you're trying to teach screenwriting and maybe more in the commercial vein. You went to the Lowell Gans Babalu Mandel School of Screenwriting, not the John Waters School of Screenwriting.
Right.
This would be a great way. It would be great to use this to look at and study, how is it kind of like you have what Parenthood is doing for the 80s, how is this of its time? What are the devices used? The characters, the creation of the characters, how much is spelled out? How much is left to wonder about? But I think the script should be studied. I think if there's ever a Parenthood sequel, Michael Arndt would be a choice of screenwriter for it.
Yeah,
and it'd
be a Pixar presentation of Parenthood.
Okay, yeah, sure, that's fine.
A lot of big butted Buckmans.
Yeah, and John Ratzenberger would be the Clint Howard character. I guess.
Yes, you would. He
Had
just shows
no
up just a little
being out
bit.
there. Yeah, he had no
Yeah.
business. But yeah, that, and I think Little Miss Sunshine should absolutely be included in cinema retrospectives of like, buy your tickets now. It's it's the Fox Searchlight 2000s retrospective at the like Angelica or whatever, and I would include it in there. To me, it's one of the stronger ones in that, at least in the group that I mentioned earlier. I'm definitely not a fan of Napoleon Dynamite, and
Right.
I'm not I liked Garden State. I don't know how well that movie has aged. Juno, I was not
Too pro-lifey.
Yeah, that wasn't even what bothered me about it. Yeah, but anyway, we're not talking about Juno. We're talking about Little Miss Sunshine. John, what would you do?
So, thanks for asking, Dan. What I would do, and I don't know if I would necessarily call this a sequel, because I feel like having a Little Miss Sunshine 2 there's nowhere to go back with the actual pageant or anything, but some sort of spin-off movie or series focusing on Dwayne and Uncle Frank. And I felt like they had a really fascinating dynamic between the two of them. And those are two characters that I wouldn't mind catching up with all this time later. I don't really need to see Greg Kinnear's character. I mean, certainly an appearance from Cheryl would be appreciated. Perhaps she's spent the past however many years living in Australia and has developed an accent. That'd be something. And I would definitely love to see what has come of Frank, if he has, because you also know at the beginning that Dwayne, he has taken this vow of silence as a response to Nietzsche, and he acknowledges that to Frank, who, is also a scholar. So you have to wonder, like, they are both into philosophy, and they do have this connection that was not, that we know of, like, connected to one another. But we see the two of them really forming a bond on this trip, and there's a respect between the two of them from when you first see them together. So I wouldn't mind seeing kind of what happened with each one of those characters and kind of how they could, how their lives could overlap again all these years later.
It's interesting. I'm glad you brought that relationship up, because another one of my kind of my new noticings as I'm watching this movie and thinking about it, because the family relations in it are kind of all over, because well, not all over, because Richard is Cheryl's second husband, I assume. And Dwayne's father lives, I forget where he lives, that like Dwayne was visiting him.
I think they mentioned it in a throwaway line.
Yeah, like towards the beginning. It's when they talk about how Olive ended up getting into the Little Miss Sunshine competition because she went to go stay with, was it like Cheryl's sister?
Okay, I don't
in Redondo
really
Beach, and then Dwayne went to his father, and so I thought about it, and I'm like, okay, so some of these characters don't know each other well. Like Grandpa and Dwayne haven't been in each other's lives for that long, for as long.
Yeah.
I guess we can assume maybe 10 years, I guess, because if Olive is almost 8.
Yeah,
anyway,
about that.
But so I'm thinking about, I'm like, well, Dwayne and Frank, their relationship theoretically goes back much further, because Frank's Cheryl's sister. Frank would have been his uncle from birth, and
from birth. Yeah.
So they had those moments where they were really bonding and go, like when they're off, like standing by the beach talking before they go back into the pageant, and I'm like, it's a really cool relationship. It's a really interesting relationship, and and in those circumstances, I would feel like, especially for Dwayne's character, having someone who's been like consistent in his life besides his mother for all those years, and like that being Frank, it's like there's a lot of that's why I really like the screenplay, because I think it doesn't tell you everything.
No.
And it doesn't, and it gives you hints. And it's also why the acting is so wonderful in this, because you get that sense. You get that right. sense of real family between them. Whereas like with Richard and Frank, it's not there. With Dwayne and Frank barely have a relation, or Dwayne and Richard barely have a relationship.
Yeah, no, for sure. And also Paul Dano and Steve Carell.
Oh, well,
hot. You know,
so hot right now.
No, they're. I don't know. Every time you say that they're at the peak of their career, they just ascend further. And
I mean, it's interesting, yeah, because I mean, so Steve Carell, when he did this, would have been coming off of 40-Year-Old Virgin. And
I want to say that he even shot this before 40-Year-Old Virgin.
He might have shot it before 40-Year-Old Virgin, because indie movies.
Either that or 40-Year-Old Virgin hadn't come out yet, because from what I remembered reading, probably on like IMDb trivia, is that the studio, they had to really convince the studio that Steve Carell was worth casting in this role, because I think that at this point he was really just like a Daily Show correspondent. Like he hadn't really done any acting before. So
I mean, so they might have filmed it even before who knows, like maybe even before Anchorman.
Right.
Which is 2004.
Yeah, I don't know when they actually shot this movie, but like even in Anchorman, I mean, look at his character. It's, it's funny moments, but it's not a lot of acting.
Right. No, I remember this was like his first, the first like serious role that he was really just known as for comedy up until that point. But yeah, and Paul Dano. I remember after this, it was There Will Be Blood, and it was like, wow, that's huge. I don't know. I respect the arc his career has taken, because I know, and you and I have talked about Love and Mercy. Him in his career taking detours like that and doing smaller films, and now you look at him and he's in the Batman, and it looks like I don't know if he's done in that franchise, but I enjoyed his performance very much.
Right. So I think that's something that we should also mention, is that he worked with these directors again on Ruby Sparks several years later. Right. So that was 2012. That was directed by Jonathan Dayton and Valerie Faris. And I don't know. I always liked seeing that actors and directors work together multiple times, because it shows that they trust each other and that they have a good working relationship and they elevate each other. I would also add. And usually, right after Little Miss Sunshine, right, we do have There'll Be Blood. Just looking at some of the other bigger ones that we have, a couple of action adventures like Night and Day and Cowboys and Aliens. And then we have Ruby Sparks. But that same year as Ruby Sparks, we've also got Looper, which he is really intense in. And that's another one of those like, indie movies that is really doing something fascinating. We were just talking about Rian Johnson earlier. Then he's in 12 Years a Slave and Prisoners. Have you seen him in Prisoners?
Oh,
the Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah.
He's bananas in that. And then the next year we have Love and Mercy. And then Swiss Army Man, Okja. And then, of course, now we have the Batman. But it's just like his career is so fascinating. And I really appreciate the choices that he makes and the chances that he takes. And he also wrote the movie Wildlife and directed the movie Wildlife. Sorry. He wrote Wildlife with Zoe Kazan, his partner, and directed that movie that was with Jake Gyllenhaal and Carey Mulligan. And I've only heard great things about it. I haven't seen it yet.
No, me neither. But yeah, no, I mean, incredible talent.
I also want to shout out, and this wouldn't have been in his filmography, but I've talked about this show before on this podcast, but he's great in Escape at Dannemora. The prison break thing that he did with Benicio del Toro and Patricia Arquette, that was, directed by Ben Stiller. Mostly. Yeah.
It's on Showtime.
It was great.
Yeah.
He was so good in it. He
list.
plays a very different kind of character.
Awesome. Well,
we love him.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. So, it's time to reveal what we're going to be talking about on the next episode.
And this is a reveal not just to our audience, but also to me. Dan, for the first time, is going to surprise me with it.
Yeah, so we're continuing our, talking about movies about families and the complications of family and, the trials and tribulations of family life and family dynamics. So what better movie to talk about than a movie about someone who saves his family? That's someone being Stuart. We are going to be talking about 1995's Stuart Saves His Family, directed by Harold Ramis, starring Al Franken, taking his Saturday Night Live character Stuart Smalley to the big screen. Vincent D'Onofrio, Laura San Giacomo, Harris Yulin are all along for the ride. So,
Dan, good call.
Was that a good call, John?
Oh, I'm happy. Stuart Saves His Family. Fantastic. I love it.
I thought, I was brainstorming about this because I usually, truth be told, forget to think about what we should do next, until we sit down to record. And then, so I was really thinking about it today and I even asked my wife, this is what we're doing and what should we do? And then it hit me in the middle of dinner, and we kind of try to keep a no phones out policy during dinner.
Yeah.
I was I need to jot this down now. I need to break the rule.
Awesome.
Stuart Saves His Family.
Yeah.
Very excited.
Well, Dan, as you are pushing a Volkswagen bus down a hill to get it to start, I wish you a good journey.
Good journey.